LSU went to Auburn and got a dub, 21-17, in an old-fashioned Tiger fight. But you watched this game early, and Auburn was up 17-0. And those Auburn boosters, God bless them, they were probably so frustrated seeing this program start to do well under Brian Harsin. Robbie Ashford's dealing. I mean, he played a phenomenal game, threw for over 300 yards. In the early going, it was like, wow, Auburn is gonna keep their guy around another week. And they may still do that. We'll see how this video ages. Regardless of the whole Brian Harsin situation, Auburn very much so wasn't able to slam the door shut. And I think in large part, it has to do with the sloppiness that we've continued to see. We saw it against Penn State. We saw it against San Jose State. This program has continued to look sloppy from a setup standpoint, from a operation standpoint, from holding on to the ball. They had 4 turnovers yesterday. You can't turn the ball over 4 times and still feel good about your chances to win the ball game. That tells me a couple of things, and we've talked about it before on this program, but we'll say it again just to make sure we drive our point home. To look sloppy in a game-like scenario equates to you have looked sloppy before behind closed doors. And if you look sloppy behind closed doors and then look sloppy in a game, that means there is somebody in charge that is allowing that to happen. It sounds harsh. I assure you this is just the way that these things go. I promise you. Coaches allow things to happen. You coach things, but even more so, I think you allow things like this to happen. Now, I'm not saying it's Brian Harsin's fault. They're turning the ball over 4 times. But as a whole, I think this is a very much so a reflection of the powers that be in this coaching staff. Now, on top of that, I think some of this could also be in part to the distractions that are surrounding your program at Auburn. Just put yourself in an Auburn football player's shoes these last 2 weeks. You were realistically a missed field goal and a fumble through the back of the end zone away from having a new interim head coach. And then all week long, all you heard was, if you lose this game, your head coach is getting fired. That was, I promise you, being in the bubble that is Auburn, that is all that you were hearing as an Auburn football player. You try to block it out. You try and keep it all in-house and stay locked in, but you can only put the blinders on so much until that impacts your psyche. And I think as a whole, it creates distraction. And distraction leads to being not present, and not being present leads to mistakes on the field. I'm not saying that these are the direct reasons for Auburn's play, but I think some of it has to do with that. Now, at the end of the day, you still have to look at this program and look at the guys in that locker room and say, hey, we turned the ball over 4 times. Brian Harsin's not fumbled the ball for us. Eric Keesaw's not fumbling the ball for us. So maybe it's a personnel thing as well, but this thing is going nowhere fast. We'll come back to this in just a second because they got Georgia next week. I think that's the exact last team you'd want to see if you're Auburn. We'll talk about them in a second. LSU, I don't know what it is. They just continue to start slow and continue to find themselves in games in the fourth quarter. We saw it opening weekend against Florida State. Sort of sleptwalked the first few quarters, picked it up, had a chance to win at the end, in some small part thanks to what Florida State did. We saw them in this game as well, just sort of sleepwalk out there, go down 17 points, and the best explanation I can give of what LSU does in these games is that meme where the guy's sitting back playing video games and he's slouched over, and then he just leans over and decides, okay, I'm going to lock in now. If you haven't seen that meme, go check my Twitter. I have it out there quite a bit talking about LSU. But that's just what it feels like. The defense at one point, after giving up 17 points, just said, no mas. We're not going to allow you to score anymore. We're just going to kind of put our foot in the ground, and that's going to be that. We're going to start playing LSU Tiger kind of football. Heck, they scored on defense. Jayden Daniels, I don't know if he ever really kicked it into overdrive. 80 yards passing, you still win the game. I mean, that you'll take it, obviously, but I'm just saying for LSU, this is great to beat a team like Auburn at Auburn. Again, you never turn down these wins. But for LSU, what happens when you go play more formidable competition? What happens when you're not playing a program that's in shambles, has their back against the wall, and their head coach about to be fired? Then what? So for LSU, they've been able to escape with it a couple of times. Mississippi State, Auburn. You saw what happened when they wanted to start slow against the Florida State team. It's actually pretty good. That can't be the case going forward for them. Now, again, I think LSU, you're more so looking to the future than you are this season, because Brian Kelly is there for a reason. It's to sort of change the batteries at LSU, to get the bad out and get the good in. So they have some things to look forward to. But as far as this season goes, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a culture thing, it's a coaching thing, but they need to find a way to start football games quicker. And I don't think that's novel analysis. But it just shows to be able to come back from 17 down, I don't care who you're against, there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of firepower in this program. They got the means to do it. They just got to start the same time everybody else starts, at kickoff. So we'll see what happens there with LSU, but I'm excited to watch them going forward, because if they can start from the jump, they're going to catch some people sleeping, which sounds funny to say about LSU, but that's the situation that they find themselves in. Okay, take a deep breath here. What is Auburn doing with Brian Harsin, man? Like, it is, let's see, what time is it right now? It is 6:37 Central, 7:37 Eastern time, and Brian Harsin is still your head coach at Auburn. Brian Harsin and Auburn are like that high school couple, and you know they're not good for each other. You know that neither of them see a future together. Nobody really wants to make it work long term. Brian Harsin's fighting tooth and nail, it would seem, but his legs are chopped out from under him from the powers that be at Auburn. Auburn doesn't want Brian Harsin to be their head coach. They don't see him being the guy to lead them. I mean, it doesn't matter how many games they win the rest of the year. He's not the guy for them, and they know that. You have your excuse right now. Is it Georgia that's going to scare you away from firing him? Because if you do, that's just soft. I mean, this whole situation sort of gives soft vibes, but I digress. Let that man go be with his family. Let him go move on in his career. Let him go be an analyst at Bama and just sort of get on with his life. It's $15 million. I know that's not chump change, but for Auburn, I think it's the least you could do, to be 100%. So, again, they go to Georgia next week. That is going from the frying pan to the fire, however you say. It's bad news when you got to go play the Dogs in the situation you're in. So we'll see how this ages. Maybe we'll get off the air tonight and Brian Harsin will no longer be the head coach at Auburn. But regardless, there's a change coming. And the longer they drag it out, I think the more disservice it does to them as a program, the worse it looks for them as a program. And think about the impact this has on recruiting. It's hard to recruit when everybody in the world, including that head coach, knows he's not going to be the guy. You can't commit to a head coach if you don't have a head coach going forward. So the longer this thing goes on, it's like poison. It's just getting to all parts of the mechanism, and it's going to be even harder to get out when it's all said and done. Auburn, do the right thing and cut ties. Golly. I hope we don't have to do that segment again next week. I really hope we don't. I hope they can just sort of put everybody out of their misery. It's the right thing to do. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.